The topic that I've been assigned is enemies of the home. And this is the audience participation part. You're going to help me fill in the blank. A man's home is his castle. Okay, good. You all know that. So this is a picture of Rochester Castle. It is in England, and it lies between the coast and London. It lies along one of the oldest trade routes in London. It's been there since the Celts and the Romans. And this lies on the River Medway. And if you were trying to get from the coast to London, you have to go over the Rochester Bridge, over the Medway River, to get to London. And so the Rochester Castle became a very important strategic feature in the English landscape. In 1215, King John signed a very famous document. We know it as the Magna Carta. A lot of our laws and rules are based off of the Magna Carta. At the time, it was groundbreaking because basically the barons forced the king to concede to all of these changes in the way that they would treat each other. I wish I could tell you that they signed the Magna Carta and everybody held up their end of the bargain. The Pope said that it was null and void. John didn't hold up his end of the bargain, and the barons didn't hold up their end of the bargain. So I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but very shortly thereafter, there became what was known as the First Barons' War. The barons rebelled against John, and they basically took over Rochester Castle. Well, John, in order to get back to England, he knew he was going to have to take Rochester Castle, and so he began to lay siege to the castle for a period of 2 months, using siege works, crossbows, arrows, battering rams, to no avail. And so after 2 months, John had an idea. We're going to begin digging a tunnel underneath the outer walls of the castle towards the keep itself. And then after about a month, he sent word back to the villages, and he said, and literally in the letter he said, please send 40 of the fattest pigs we have that are not good for eating. When they got there, they slaughtered the pigs, and most folks don't know this, but pig fat is extremely flammable and burns very, very hot. In an age when gunpowder did not exist, they used the pig fat to go into the mining works and basically slather all of the woodworks with pig fat, set it on fire, retreated, and then the southern wall of the keep disintegrated. It basically just fell under the weight of all of those stones. John had successfully undermined Rochester Castle. It's where we get our word undermine today. When you think about what an enemy does, really what an enemy is seeking to do is they are seeking to undermine those that they are coming up against. They are seeking to subvert, to cause them to surrender, to subdue them in any way that they can, whether through frontal assault or whether through treachery or, in this case, literally digging underneath their defenses. When I was thinking about what to talk about tonight, there were a lot of potential topics that I could have chosen. We could have talked about technology as a potential enemy of the home. Could have talked about culture. We could have talked about addiction. We could have talked about distractions. We could have talked about sports. We could have talked about materialism. We could have talked about the chase for beauty, for youth, for strength, for vitality. The problem is, we probably don't need another list of things that we should or shouldn't do. If you ever listen to Rob Whitaker, he talks a lot about that the Scriptures provide us, it's a book of do's, it's not a book of don'ts. We don't have the time to enumerate all of the possible activities that might undermine the family. So instead, I would like for us to think about what are some principles that we can think about when it comes to protecting our families. In Ephesians chapter 5, so I'm hoping you're there, we're going to start in verse 33. There is an unfortunate chapter break right here at the end of chapter 5 because the thought continues into chapter 6. one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Now, Paul has just finished talking about the relationship between Christ and the church. But notice he has used the marriage between a husband and a woman to describe that relationship. And so, is Ephesians chapter 5 and the latter half of the chapter, is it about a husband and a wife, or is it about Christ and the church? Yes, that's right. It's about both of them. And so, after Paul has made his point about Christ and the church, he kind of loops back around to finish his thought about marriage, right? He's going to put a little capstone on this. He says, men, you need to love your wife as you love yourself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. But then he continues on with this family, thinking about the family. He says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you, and you may live long on the earth. And you, father, see, he didn't stop right there. See, the dads, we would have liked for this whole thing to have just kind of stopped right there. It's like, yeah, you heard that, right? You heard that, right? Honor your father and mother. But Paul doesn't stop there. All right? Paul is an equal opportunity offender. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. There are 4 things in these verses that I want us to hone in on, things that are needed in a strong home. 1, love. Notice Paul said, husbands, love your wives. That word, that love there is the Greek agape. It's the same word that Paul uses in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, uses a lot in his writings. It's that all-encompassing love. The love that says, I want what is best for you, no matter what that looks like. Then he also uses the word honor when he's talking about the children. He says that you are to honor your father and your mother, right? Give them the praise that they are due. He talks about the word respect. He says, wives, see that you respect. If you have King James, it says reverence your husbands. And then finally, he says that fathers nurture your children. Anybody have a translation that says something other than nurture? Bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord, right? Some versions will say that word nurture or training there is the Greek word paideia, which is a really cool word. It encompasses the entire training of a person. It's not just saying, okay, this is just about your physical training, or this is just about your mental, your academic training. No, this is everything. This is your character. This is your body. This is your mind. This is your soul. All of it is wrapped up in this one word of paideia, that you are responsible, parents. You are responsible for the shepherding of this young person until they reach the age of majority, whatever that happens to look like in your culture. So what's needed for this strong home? Love, honor, respect, nurture, and not necessarily in that order. There's a tale, I don't even know how old this is, it's been around a long time. I guess it's been around since the days of the Conestoga wagons, since it's about a Conestoga wagon. These travelers, they pull into town. They've got all their goods loaded in the back. They stop in, and the old-timer says, well, what brings you into town? They said, well, we just left our old town, pulled up stakes, looking for a new place to live. He says, oh, I see. He said, well, the traveler, he said, what kind of folks live around here? The old-timer said, well, what were the folks like where you came from? He said, man, they would stab you in the back first chance they got. Mean, ornery folks. Couldn't trust them. Liars, cheats, thieves. Always doing something to make you mad. The old-timer said, well, you'll probably find the folks around here a lot like that too. And so the travelers didn't care for his answer, and so they went on their way. And then another family came in a little while later, all the belongings on their back. Said, we just pulled up stakes, looking for a place to live. What are the folks like around here? The old timer said, well, what are the folks like where you came from? And they said, we just left a wonderful place. Everyone was so nice, so kind, so neighborly. Everybody helped each other, always tried to do right by each other. Always tried to do the right thing. And the old timer says, you'll probably find that folks around here are a lot like that too. We see what we're looking for, and we hear what we are listening for. Everybody is tuned in to WIIFM. It's the world's most famous radio station. Does anybody know WIIFM? No? No? What's in it for me? WIIFM, the most famous radio station, because we're all tuned into it. Because at heart, we are a selfish people. The heart of all mankind is tuned to its own desires. And we are constantly looking for the things that affirm what we want to believe, things that affirm what we want to do, things that support all of those. Because we do that, we act in ways that are usually in our own best interest and not necessarily in the best interest of those maybe that we are married to, or those that are in our household, or those that we share a pew with in the church, those that we work with, those that we go to school with. When we tune into WIIFM, right, we're constantly looking for what is in it for me. I want you to think of a vortex. And now Michael is concerned because WIIFM has 5 and radio call signs are only supposed to have 4. I know. I hope you'll indulge me. I thought the same thing when I first started too. I was like, that's a 5. It's supposed to be 4. Think of a vortex. If you ever pulled the plug on the drain on your bathtub, you've seen that water swirl around. Or if you've ever seen any of the old, some of the old action movies when they're out there on the sea, they'll have this huge vortex that begins to swirl and it pulls the ships closer and closer and closer until finally they get pulled in and they get pulled down under, never to rise again. In his book, Love and Respect, Emerson Eggerichs talks about the crazy cycle that husbands and wives can get into when it comes to love that women need and respect that men need. It can begin with a negative expression being detected. Has anybody ever used a radio that you actually had to really tune it in? I'm not talking about a digital radio where it clicks, like click, click, click. The old radios, right, where you had to really fine tune to get it dialed in, right? When we hear the things that we're wanting to hear and we see the things that we're wanting to see, we are dialed in and we are very sensitive to certain things. And so our spouse may say something or do something, and because we are tuned in on a negative thought, we're there to pick that up. We may miss the positive intention that they may even have had behind that. But instead we pick up a negative thought and we interpret it negatively. So there's a negative expression that I have detected. And so maybe it's a wife and she says, that makes me feel unloved. Something he said, something he forgot this important date. How could he forget the 33rd anniversary of the second time that we went to Dairy Queen? Right? I mean, how insensitive can you be? All right? But there's something has happened and she feels unloved. Then a negative expression is detected by him and he feels disrespect. And so now we have started the spiral downward, right? And we have choices to make. We can either try to stop or we can feed. We can give into, right, the flesh that says, I've been hurt, I will hurt you back. If we continue down that path, more negative expressions come out. We feel further unloved. More negative expressions come out. We feel further disrespect, right? And so we can get into, again, that cycle. Now, this is for the husband and the wife, but the same thing can happen between parents and children as well, right? Just as Paul says that husbands need to love their wives, wives need to respect their husbands, he also says, children, you need to honor your parents. Parents, you need to nurture your children. Well, what happens when a father or a mother, when they feel that they are not being honored by their children, when they feel that their children are not giving them what they are due? It may be that maybe I don't feel like spending more time with my son, with my daughter. How does the son and the daughter feel when dad or mom, they don't spend as much time with me as I want them to, like I think that they ought to? I feel neglected. And so I might respond by acting out with disobedience or not honoring my father and my mother. So what I want us to think about, the principle is anything that undermines love, respect, honor, and nurture is an enemy of your home. Now, someone may say, well, what are those things? I don't know. It could be any number of things. Now, I started off, I said we weren't going to talk about technology. We weren't going to talk about addictions. We weren't going to talk about sports. We weren't going to talk about distractions, right? Or culture, or sports, or materialism. But any one of those things could be a source that is undermining your ability, husbands, to love your wives well. Any one of those things could be, wives, that could be a source that is preventing or inhibiting you from respecting your husband. Parents, this could be something that is inhibiting you from nurturing your children. And children, I realize we don't have a lot of young children in here, but I would submit that this children obey your parents in the Lord. I would submit to you that the audience that Paul has in mind when he writes children obey your parents in the Lord are not children, although they should. I would submit that he is talking about children that are well able to understand the Scriptures, who are well able to reason for themselves. So some of us in this room, even though we may be above the age of 18, we still owe an honor to our parents. So anything that makes it more difficult for you to honor your parents, that's an enemy of your home. There's a movie, I looked this up, the movie Hook came out. Robin Williams was Peter Pan. Dustin Hoffman was Hook. Matt, you want to guess what year it was? Well, that sounds about right. It came out in 1991. Came out in 1991. But there's a scene in the movie where Peter Pan's son, Jack, he's been captured, he's been kidnapped by Captain Hook. And there's a point at which Captain Hook has been doing all of these. He's been playing baseball with Jack. He bought him this really nice pirate's outfit that he could wear. All the things that he could ever want. And there's a scene where Peter Pan, he comes to Jack and he says, "Let's go home, Jack." And Jack looks at his dad and he says, "I am home." Speaking of being on the ship with Captain Hook. It's a dagger to the heart of any dad, right? If you were to look into the eyes of your son, you say, "Come home with me," and they say, "No, I am home." In that moment, Robin Williams' character, he realizes that the reason that Jack is acting the way he is not Hook's fault. He realizes it is his own behavior that has pushed his son away and has led to this place where he is now vulnerable to the advances, I guess we might say, of Captain Hook. So that he has now said, no, I am home. It has a happy ending. I hope I'm not spoiling that for anybody. But he says, no, he says, I am home. So we can think about, who is really sabotaging our relationship? If you're a husband and you're having maybe a hard time in your marriage with your wife, or your wife, you're having a hard time in your marriage with your husband, children with your parents, parents with your children, it's easy to think they're the problem. But when you find out who's really sabotaging your relationships, it's actually you. I'm the problem with my relationships, right? Most of the time it is my behavior. If I ever reach a point where I know for a fact that I am 100% in the right in everything that I do in my marriage with Gina, I will let you know. I haven't gotten there yet. Or when I'm 100% in the right with all of my children, I'll let you know I'm not there yet. There are things that I still say, things that I still do, actions that I take that hurt my wife, that hurt my children. Okay? So there are still things that I need to work on personally. So here's again, I won't ask you to say this out loud, but take a minute and think about in your life, where are you sabotaging your relationship with your spouse, if you're married, where are you sabotaging your relationship with your children, if you have children? Could be adult children or young children. Where are you sabotaging your relationship with your parents? You could still live with them. You may not live with them. And it's not always something that is intentionally hurtful. See, I would guess that in a room like this, most of us are not going to get in the car on the way home and say something intentionally hurtful to our spouse. Most of us are not going to get in the car on the way home, and we're not going to intentionally do or say anything to hurt our children, and our children are not going to do or say anything to hurt our parents. Most of the time what ends up happening is it is the allocation of our time, right? Where our priorities are has a lot to do with whether or not we are hurting that other person. Now, I said Emerson Eggerichs, he called it the crazy cycle, right? We can get in that crazy downward cycle, right, where we're picking up on all these negative expressions, and then we're feeling unloved, we're feeling disrespected, we're feeling neglected, we're feeling dishonored. But the same can actually go in the other direction. There can be an energizing cycle, something that can be reversed. So if, a home can be rebuilt, as it were. How many of you, anybody here familiar with the 5 love languages? I know one of the speakers talked about that. Okay, good. All right, if you didn't raise your hand, highly recommend that you either get a physical copy or listen to an audiobook of the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman. It's very, very good. We can reverse a lot of these negative expressions, this detection of negative feelings. And so now we can create an upward cycle, right, where a positive expression is detected. I feel loved. More positive expression. I feel respected. More positive expression. I feel loved. Positive expression. Feel respected. All of these things can have an upward trajectory, right? They can push our relationship in an upward direction. The problem is it doesn't happen as quickly as we think it does, and it doesn't happen as quickly as we think it should. Researchers have shown that there is more or less a golden ratio in healthy relationships of positive expressions of compliments, positive expressions of love, of admiration, versus a critical expression, something that you need to work on. What might you guess is that ratio? 5 to 1. That's excellent. Very good. It's 5 to 1. 5 positive things for 1 negative or critical thing. Now, that's in a healthy relationship. What do you suspect it might be in an unhealthy relationship? All the time, right. It's more like 20 to 1 is what you need. If you're going to get out of that death spiral in the relationship, right, the research suggests that you're going to have to quadruple the number of positive things that you are giving to the other person. Whether it's your spouse or your children or your parents, you are going to almost 20 to 1. Every one thing you give them to work on, you say, hey, you really need to work on putting the toilet seat down. But now here are 20 things that you got right. That's tough to do. It's tough to do 5 to 1, right? Especially if that's not your mode of operating. But you're going to have to get to 20 to 1 because, remember, your spouse's radio antenna is tuned to what? WIIFM, right? And so if your spouse has tuned themselves to pick up on the negative that comes from you, even if you give them 18, 19 positive things, they haven't picked up on it. You got to give them 20. You got to give them more for them to pick up on it. But you can begin to have these things, you can begin to retune what you are listening to and looking for. I had a manager that I used to work with when I worked at Zepp in Cartersville. His name was Bill Graves. Bill would walk around, and every time, like he'd be walking down the aisle in this huge warehouse, and there'd be a paper clip on the ground. He'd pick it up. He'd pick up a paper clip. He'd put it in his pocket. He'd be walking along, there'd be another paper clip. He'd pick up paper clips, rubber bands. Some of his guys asked him one time, they said, why are you bending down and picking up paper clips and rubber bands off the floor? He says, it's still a good paper clip. It's still a good rubber band. They have value. That value may only be a penny, but they have value. And if I keep picking them up over time, I am accumulating that value. And pennies add to dollars, right? Single dollars added up to tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. The same thing is true in the relationships that we have. So I want you to think about picking up the pennies in your relationship. Start looking for the little things of value that your spouse is putting out there for you to pick up, right? I did the laundry. I folded the clothes. I called the doctor. I made the dentist appointment. I went to work. I got a paycheck. I changed the oil in the car. I rewired that outlet that you've been asking me to rewire for 10 years. Whatever it is, there are things that are happening, and this goes with the parent-child relationship too. There are good things going on. There are pennies that are being put down. We got to start picking them up and acknowledging that they are there and that they have value. In Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8, Paul puts it this way. He says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, noble, just, pure, lovely, or of good report, If there is any virtue or anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. What are you spending your time thinking about when it comes to your relationship with your spouse? What do you spend your time thinking about when it comes to your relationship with your children or with your parents? Do you find yourself thinking about all of the things that they got wrong? Or do you find yourself thinking about all of the ways that they are expressing their love for you, expressing their love for others, the things that they're getting right? Now, there's one other thing I want to mention here. See, a husband and a wife, they can put this positive spiral in place. They can say, you know what, we've been riding this negative train too long. We're going to start picking up the pennies for each other. We're going to start acknowledging the good that each other does. We're going to start expressing love. We're going to start expressing respect. And we're going to look for ways that our spouse is showing us love. We're going to look for ways that our spouse is showing us respect. And the same is true for the parent and the child, but with honor and nurture. And that relationship can begin to improve. They may experience some success, but it will be a fleeting success because you are still having a worldly approach to why you are doing what you are doing. If you are only trying to improve the relationship with your spouse because you're just sick and tired of having a bad relationship, it'll get better for a little while. But then you're going to realize this is something I got to do every day, even when they don't reciprocate. That's hard. And if you're trying to do this just because you want your children to just do what I tell you to do, okay, I'm going to work on this nurture thing, and you're going to do what I tell you to do. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And that's going to be frustrating. You're like, man, I got to do this nurture thing all the time? I don't know if I signed up for this. When we take a worldly mindset, we're trying to fix worldly relationships from a worldly perspective. That is not sustainable. We are going to grind ourselves into dirt trying to do that. You will burn out trying to do it. Instead, there is a whole other circle that we need to be into. It's the circle of life. Nope, not that one. Sorry, not that one. It's a circle that includes the greatest role reversal in the history of the world. See, the Scriptures tell us that what we deserve. Go and read Romans chapter 1. Read Romans chapter 2. Read Romans chapter 3, and you will get a very clear sense of what we deserved. We deserve God's wrath. We deserve eternal humiliation for the way that we have behaved. We deserve eternal shame for the way that we have behaved, for the words that we have used, for the actions that we have taken against other people and against God. We deserve to be neglected, to be left out, to be cast out. But when we look at the life that Jesus lives in the Gospels, when we look at the life that the Holy Spirit has left a record for us to understand, what kind of life did Jesus live? What kind of life did God in the flesh, what did He do when He was here on the earth? We see that Jesus, He deserves eternal love. Jesus deserves eternal respect. He deserves infinite honor. He deserves constant nurture. That's what is deserved. Instead, Jesus received the wrath that you and I deserved. He received the humiliation that we should have gotten when he went through the mockery of a trial that was given to him by the Jews and the Romans. Jesus received the shame that we should have received when he was hung on a thief's cross. Jesus received the neglect when he was cast out, when he was alienated from the presence of God the Father. And we've got a word for that. When Jesus did all that, it was an act of mercy. God having mercy on us by not giving us what we deserve, but all of the things that we had done still required a price to be paid. If you go and read Romans chapter 3, go and read the verses that follow, or that surround Romans 3:23, where it says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There's a whole section around that that talks about that God is just and He's the justifier. His wrath must be appeased, and He's the only one who's able to offer a sacrifice that's able to appease that wrath. And so we get mercy because Jesus received what we deserve. But God goes even further than that. He doesn't just not give us what we deserved. He now gives us what we didn't deserve. He gives us what Jesus deserved, right? Because now, as Christians, we receive the love of the Father that was due to Jesus. We receive the respect of the Father, of the angels, that was due to Jesus. We receive the honor that was due to Christ. You think about a man who has been in the war, right? And he comes home and he's a decorated war veteran. You look at his uniform, and there are just medals everywhere from all the battles that he's been in and that he's won, and the acts of valor and courage, bravery. He's got all these medals, right? He earned every single one of them, and he takes it off and he puts it on you. And he says, here, you deserve this. We get all of the honor that was due to Jesus, and we get all of the soul, mind, body. We get all of the training. We get all of the nurture from God that Jesus should have gotten. And we call that grace, because we've gotten what we didn't deserve. Psalm 127, verse 1 says, except the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. When we're talking about enemies of the home, a lot of times we think about the home that we built. If you're married, if you have kids, we think about a home that we built. We talk about our home. The Scriptures remind us that there are no homes that don't belong to God. There are only those that have recognized that their home belongs to God, and those that have not recognized that their home belongs to God. So when we recognize that our home belongs to God, now we can begin to act in ways towards our spouse, towards our kids, towards our parents. We can begin to do those things in a sustainable way. Jesus gives us love, respect, honor, and nurture. Jesus redeems us so that we can seek the redemption of those that we are in closest physical relationship with. Husbands, Christ didn't just redeem you so that you could live a good life and you could go to heaven by yourself and not worry about anybody else. Christ redeemed you so that you can be part of His work on this earth to redeem your spouse, to redeem your wife. And part of the way that you help redeem your wife for God is that you express God's love to her through you. And wives, God did not redeem you just so you could live a good life and go to heaven. God redeemed you so that you could help God redeem your husband, so that you can show God's respect to your husband through you. The same thing is true for our children. Parents, God redeemed us so that we can help do the work of raising these children to be redeemed people. And if you're a child and you have a parent, the obedience and the honor that you give to your parents, that is a way in which God is helping to redeem your parents through your obedience and submission to them. It has nothing to do with whether or not they deserve it. Husbands, the love you give your wife, it has nothing to do with whether or not they deserve it. Wives, if you give your husband respect, it has nothing to do with whether or not he deserves it. I can go ahead and tell you, they don't deserve it. Husbands, your wives don't deserve. Your children don't deserve it. Your parents don't deserve it. We already talked about what we deserve. None of it was good, right? But because God gives us what we don't deserve, we now have a cup that should be full and overflowing, and that we can give to those that we are in close physical contact with. This evening I want you to think about this phrase, I will because He has. Husbands, I will express God's love to my wife because Jesus has already bestowed respect upon me. Wives, I will express respect to my husband because Jesus has already bestowed eternal love on me. Children, I will honor my parents because Jesus has already bestowed eternal nurture on me through His love, through His Holy Spirit. And then, parents, I will express care, nurture to my children because God has already bestowed honor upon me. This evening, I know we're not really giving an invitation, and a lesson like this really isn't designed for people who are outside the church, although I think that this is something that would probably benefit most people. But this is designed for those of us who are already Christians. And so my question for you would be is, where is your house built? In Matthew chapter 7 and verse 25, Jesus there in giving His parable of the wise and the foolish builder, concerning the wise, He says, and the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. Material things will fail. Rochester Castle, tallest castle in England. And yet, Southeast Tower fell. It failed. John went in and he wins, right? Because of the undermining that had happened. The spiritual houses that we build, when we build them on the rock, which is Christ, that is a rock that can never be undermined. If we will continue to place our faith in Christ and continue to walk after Christ, after His ways, and if we will, work on expressing God's love, respect, honor, and nurture to those that we are in close physical contact with, that is how we fortify a family that can withstand attacks from without. So, appreciate your time. Thanks for letting me be here tonight.